Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Endurance School and to Detention. We are here today with good friend Jesse Vondracek, joining us all the way from Tucson. Right? That's where you are.
Yeah,
You're not traveling right now.
I'm
That's
not. I'm home in Tucson. It's been a long time since I've been to detention, so thanks for having me on.
anytime, anytime. I feel like we're gonna get into some stories about that, but first, I want to make sure that everybody knows exactly who you are. So I'm gonna kick it over to Chris Bagg for just a little introduction magic.
So some of you may know Jesse from camp. He has helped us out at some of the CDCG and Hit the Block camps that we've done in Tucson in the past. But Jesse Vondracek is a father, a husband, and a lover of being outside. Uh,
Okay.
this I couldn't help myself.
Okay.
This love of the outdoors led him to triathlon, where he has raced professionally for a decade. He's also been coaching for the last 9 years. Before that, a topic near and dear both mine and Molly's hearts, he spent 10 years teaching before becoming a full-time coach and athlete. He really enjoys the process of helping others learn and grow in the sport, and he also loves a good hazy IPA. Jesse, on the racing side, is a perennial fixture inside the top 10 at 70.3 and iron distance races around the world, coming in 10th recently at the freezing ass cold Bear Lake Brawl in southern Idaho. He's also been ninth at 70.3 North American Champs in St. George in 2019, sixth place at Ironman Arizona, clocking an 8:21 in 2018. He followed that result up a few weeks after that with a fifth place finish at Indian Wells 70.3, one of his highest professional finishes. He is the owner of Top Step Training based in Tucson, Arizona. And depending on what year and what is going on, he has the best top knot or mutton chops in triathlon. Jesse Vondracek, welcome to detention.
Well, thank you very much. That was a long intro. It made me feel like I've done one or two things in the last 10 years. That was good. I mean,
You really have.
yeah, and I mean the chops that took me a long time to grow. So I was happy about that mention. Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know if you ever. I also raced with chops at one point, inspired by the great Brian Rhodes. Um,
The great at many things. That's
we should have Rhodesy on the show. That would be marvelous. We don't have to do any preparation. Just let him talk.
it'd have to be like beers with the roads here or something. It'd have to be after detention.
Post
um,
detention.
so speaking of detention, you say that it's been a while since you spent some time in detention. In middle school or high school, what would have found you getting sent to detention?
Um, I was pretty quiet in middle school, and then in high school, I turned into a little bit more of a rebel. I drove like a Volkswagen bus and had pretty long hair, like past my shoulders for a while. Um, and I would, well, I got caught doing some of the standard kids things, but I also would kind of voice my opinion, sometimes rather loudly, at teachers. And that got me in trouble most of the time.
That sounds like yeah, it sounds like you and I got sent to detention for the same things in middle
Same,
school and high school.
same. Yeah, same, same.
Nice.
So then, was it a weird transition as you escaped from the detention world and immediately, or not immediately, I guess, but at some point joined the ranks of the teachers that you were antagonizing?
It was pretty immediate, but it was kind of an accidental process, and I it was kind of a slow build into what I would consider like really teaching. Like the first year I taught was at a charter school that was basically a last chance school for kids that were off the wall, and so it was like I don't know. It was a very interesting experience, and it didn't really feel like teaching because I had very small classes. It was kind of like hanging out with kids and like making sure they learned a little math and learned how to kind of survive in life. Um, and then I spent a year teaching in Korea, and then I actually had my first real teaching job like 2 years after that. So, or 2 years after I started. So it was kind of a build up to being a full-fledged teacher.
So tell us the story about how you say you kind of fell into it that first year. Tell us how that occurred.
Well, I was driving across country and I ran out of money, and so I was stopped and was living with my cousin on his couch, and I started changing oil because I had some experience doing that, and I was like looking for another job, and I had enough credits to be highly qualified, so I found a job teaching, just like literally in the classifieds, like it's in a newspaper for those of you who are too young to remember that. But yeah, and so I was like, oh well, I'm qualified to do this, so I guess I could give it a whirl for a year, and so started teaching.
And how did
Um,
you end up going to Korea?
Um, I I was teaching at the Last Chance School, and it was like kind of fun, but highly stressful. I had like one kid kind of holding me against the wall in like a
Oh
chokehold.
my God.
He was like 6'6" and like had my feet off the ground. It was kind of serious. I was like, all right, well, I don't know, like if I really am in for another year of this. And I got, a headhunter contacted me about teaching in Korea, and so my girlfriend at the time was super psyched on it. So we both were like, oh, let's go spend a year living abroad teaching Korea. Sounds kind of fun.
and so at a certain point, you decided like this is going to be the thing that I want to do for a while. Like, what about teaching intrigued you or interested you?
Um, I I guess like that moment when like you see a student understand what you're teaching, that was always pretty fun and inspiring. And I like the summers off too. Can't really beat that.
Do you think that after we wrap up this interview, you can help me understand absolute value?
Definitely not. It sounds like you need way more help than I can provide in one night. But we could set up some tutoring sessions. We might need a series of them.
I
Probably
actually
right.
think that's something that we should do. I think that's a really good idea.
I think my high school days were before the days of learning differences, but I can guess that perhaps around absolute value, I may have one of those.
A commitment to not understand it, also possibly true. So how has your experience with teaching shaped your transition into coaching? How has that informed the way that you work with athletes?
I mean, it's all the same, right? Just a different subject matter. So it's the biggest difference for me is like teaching high school, the kids were kind of forced to be there, and now teaching adults, they're choosing to be there, and that makes it really fun because they're already engaged. Like they want to be there, they want to learn, and so it's not my job to like cattle prod them to do the thing. It's like it's packaging it in a way that makes sense to them, and that's kind of like the fun part that without all the red tape that you have in teaching, which you guys know, but
What is Tell us about like some interaction with an athlete that you have where you feel like, oh, like I really used my teaching chops to make something to make a concept or something that I wanted to get out of an athlete really clear.
I think maybe the biggest carryover is or I guess the easiest one to explain is in swimming. Like when I watch someone swim, I have 50 things in my head, and I would love to just word vomit and just give them everything. But from especially from teaching like sixth graders, I've learned that like I can't do that, and I need like one thing today, and then I can tell them another thing tomorrow. But maybe an adult, it can be a little bit more. I might be able to layer a few things, but be like learning to hold back and not trying to give them everything at once. Like when I was teaching math in high school, and you want to just be like, oh well, this is you just solve the problem like this. You just do it like, and then you're done. But you really have to break it down step by step, and kind of that like transition from like, okay, like I need to teach them the basics, and then we can build, and eventually they'll be able to solve the entire problem. like swimming's the same, where like we can talk about like this aspect, and then eventually we'll be able to put the entire stroke together and it will look gorgeous.
I think that's a great point. I really wish that 15 years ago, Coach Molly had known that about not telling everybody like everything that you
It's
see.
it's so hard, right? You have to like bite your tongue and say, okay, like I can't talk about that because like
Right.
you can't think about your head, your hips, your hands all at the same time. But like, so yeah, it's hard, but yeah, you have to do it.
That's perfect. Yeah, totally.
So in some ways, this wonderful year has kind of been detention for all of us. Um, so, how have you dealt with the different challenges of 2020?
So yeah, I feel like it's kind of funny because you can like I can like put on my coach's hat and talk to my athletes and kind of like reason through like what we're doing and why we're doing it and kind of try and make sense of the process. And then I put on my athlete hat and do like the exact opposite, right? And um, but yeah, it's been kind of a roller coaster and really trying to deal with like getting ready for races and then having races get canceled and then not knowing like how much energy you want to put into getting ready for a race, um, and trying to like ride that line of like, okay, well, I kind of need to be like 80% in case a race pops up so that I can at least get to like 90% ready to race in a few weeks. um, has been That's been like kind of stressful on, I'd say, on me and my family, where it's like, well, like, why are you training so much if there's nothing going on? Like, why don't you do this house project? And it's like, well, I kind of like feel like I need to be ready just in case. And so that kind of like that tension that's kind of there all year has been a tough one to manage.
What does 80% ready look like in your context? Like, what paint us the picture of what training for 80% is.
So I feel like, do you want like numbers? I guess is that.
It can be numbers. It can also be sort of subjective, just kind of your description of it. It can be anecdotal. Yeah, just I don't know. I guess sort of your feeling of it.
Okay, so I guess to lay it out in like numbers, just because that's somewhat easier, is like I need to be riding maybe like 200, 250 miles a week, running like 35 to 40 miles a week. And the swimming's been a little bit different this year just because of pool access. But if I can touch the water 3 times a week, like that's not enough. But I did swim in college, so I feel like I can swim a little bit less and be okay. Um, so that's kind of like big picture what I was trying to stay in touch with every week. Like obviously an ebb and flow there. Um, and we still like, luckily enough, I have a few guys that I've been riding with kind of since before this whole thing started. Um, and so we can still say, okay, like on Saturday we're gonna ride pretty hard, and it's kind of like a little group ride. So I haven't been doing like a ton of structured work, but I have a few guys that ride harder than me, so that um, I've kind of got that going. And like same with running, I've got a few guys that I've kind of always run with, and they're like still doing some track workouts, so I kind of jump in one of those a week. So like a little bit of intensity, a little bit of volume, and just kind of like, yeah, staying in touch.
Solid foundation on which to build.
Yeah.
That's great. So the endurance school has kind of been our COVID project as the year has shaped up to cancel some things and to allow time for other things. This has really been where we've spent our focus. What has been something that this weird year has afforded you the chance to do? Like, what have you had time to do, or any project you've started? What do you feel like you got to do this year that you wouldn't have gotten to do if your focus had been the way, you intended it to be?
So that's a that's an interesting question, and I feel like in hindsight I would have put more energy in other places, right? Because I probably didn't need to keep up that consistent pace all year long. I could have said, "Oh, I'm going to take 2 weeks and do this house project," and instead I was like, "Okay, I kind of need to be doing this every week." Um, and the other wrench that we had is that like childcare wasn't a thing for a while, and so like given that my wife works and then we had a 2-year-old in the house, and then she was working from home and I was working from home. It kind of we kind of locked into like survival mode and didn't have this extra time in which you speak of, um, where like where before like this year started, our kiddo was in school a bit, and then we had like maybe a little bit more free time, but it was really more just like past the baby from like while we had like one meeting to the next, um, and that so I guess project Keep Frankie Alive was kind of my COVID project, and it's so far been successful, so I'd call that a win.
That's a good one.
Nice work.
Keep that going.
Yeah, that's I that's the bar, and that's I'm happy with that right now.
Right before we went live, you talked about possibly panic training for Ironman Arizona. So building off of that sort of 80% base that you've established, um, I think that athletes sometimes approach the word panic training with maybe about 60% joking and 40% no, this is actually panic training. Um, what what will change? Like, what will you try to add to your training in order to get prepared for that race?
So I guess just I really liked the word panic. I think it's really funny, and so I kind of joke with it a lot. And I wouldn't really consider what I'm doing panic training, but what I would say is like when I have jumps in my training that are like bigger than I would normally like to have, that's kind of like a good sign that I'm panic training. And so like my longest long run in a very long time was like 14 miles. And last weekend I ran 18 miles, and I would call that jump is kind of like that's me panic training, just kind of doing that all at once. Um, but I kind of wanted to like rip the band-aid off of like what I of a, like a real long run in order to get ready for Ironman. It's like if I do one 18 miler, then I could just do a few more, and then I'm like kind of good to go. Um, but I would say like that jump is like, oh yeah, that's a panic training move right there. Um, did I answer your question or just talk for a while?
No, totally. I
All
think
right.
that, yeah, I think that, I mean, it sort of strikes me as one of those things that, like, as a coach, you would be like, well, I'm going to do this, and some of my athletes may end up doing something like this, but it's not necessarily like what I would do all the time. But
Right.
I mean, basically, you're talking about it's like when you do like a big test set in the pool, and it's kind of a like, how am I doing? Like, can I do 4x1,000 at Ironman effort? That kind of thing. And if you can't, you're like, okay, back to the drawing board. That sucked. And if you can, you're like, okay, moving forward. Like all systems are kind of go.
Yeah, yeah. The I think the thing that makes it a little bit more like panicky is like that well, there's maybe a risk of injury here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially, I mean, I'm an old man, so like for me, like if I bump up my running or my running intensity too fast, I'll snap in half. So like doing those things that are like, yeah, this throttle is like being pushed a little too hard, but like I kind of feel like that's what I need to do right now. And um, obviously I'm like being smart about it, and I'm not going to like injure myself because we're still not even sure if it's going to happen. But just like the training kind of tends a little more towards those lines. But I mean, like I said, I really wouldn't call it panic training because I've been doing like some 80-mile rides and 90-mile rides. Like, so jumping over to doing like 100-mile rides or 120-mile rides isn't like crazy. And so,
Yeah, I think the idea of you panic training certainly belies the kind of steady and consistent progress that you've made in the sport and as a professional athlete. Can you tell us a little bit about about what you attribute that to? It seems like you have pretty consistently improved year over year, and you come back and now you're placing in the top 10 in professional races. Like, how do you feel like you have developed that?
um, by by being healthy, I think
Huh?
like I hear like people talk about like, oh, if you have talent or don't have talent, and like what's this talent look like, and kind of looking back at my career, I mean I've had some pretty solid injuries, but like they've been spaced out, and then I've done some things to kind of correct and stay relatively healthy and been able to train like pretty consistently for a decade, and so it's like finally paying off a little bit. Um, and I think that, yeah, I think that, you know, it's an endurance aerobic sport, right? And so consistent work over a long period of time is like the one of the only ways to get faster, like once you kind of reach a certain point.
You, speaking of injury, you are coming off of a particularly uncomfortable sounding injury. Would you mind describing it to us and our audience, and also what the path back has been?
Yeah, it's really weird when like random people walk up to me and say, "Oh man, how's your crotch doing?" Um, or
That's
like my
usually
wife
how I
overhears
greet
me
you.
talking to people and like, "Oh yeah, just another crotch conversation. Don't worry, it's totally fine." Um, so I had a few things go wrong like along my pubic bone. My I had some shearing on my pubic symphysis, and then I had a like a stress reaction on my pubic bone where the adductor and the ab come together, um, kind of all on the left side except the pubic symphysis in the middle there, and that whole region, like I got an MRI and the whole region was like pretty bright with inflammation. And the tendons didn't look very good, and like you could see kind of the shearing going on in the middle. Um, so yeah, that's not a place where you want to get an injury. Like, I mean, you never want to get an injury, but sometimes you're like, okay, like I have a broken bone or I have a stress reaction. I can put this in a sling and I'll be good to go. And this happened, or I guess this got past the breaking point last October, and I'm still dealing with symptoms. Like I still got to be pretty careful with my run warm up and my kind of run cool down, and making sure that area stays pretty happy, else I get some pain. Um, and again, it's like unfortunately the kind of pain where it doesn't feel too bad during. I can totally run through it, but then I'll go to bed at night and like I'll have like pretty intense pain and be like, okay, that was too much. And so that's when I still have some kind of real pain from it.
Oh, that sounds like it really hurts. Ugh.
Yeah, I don't recommend it.
Don't do it.
Yeah, don't
Don't
do
do
that.
it.
Um, but yeah, so you asked me a little bit about the path back, and that's been it. So I've been working with a PT like pretty regularly throughout my career, especially since I've been in Tucson, and it was very little actual hands-on work. We just did a lot of trial and error as far as like what exercises I could do made me feel better and what made me feel worse, and then like really working on increasing my run but not crossing that line. So I did a lot of like quarter mile runs, and then I gonna go back and check in with him. Like we did a few Saturdays of like, oh yeah, we'll just do a bunch of quarter mile runs, and then we'll go back and check in and see how my body's reacting, because he could kind of test me and like get a better sense. Because one of the things we've discovered over the years is that we kind of can't rely on what I think is pain. Um, so he kind of do some tests to see if things were actually like acting up over trusting my judgment on my body. Um, so yeah, and then really trying to stay underneath that pain threshold and being really diligent about my pre and post exercises and building up extremely gradually. Like I took 8 weeks totally off of running, and then started out with like some walking, and so that the process back was really long. And actually, I mean, this year was a blessing because I would have gotten ready for Oceanside, and I probably would have ended up like back at square one from doing that. So not having to do that helped me get close to injury free.
Tell
And were
us
you?
a little bit about that, like pain calibration, because I think that that's something that we as coaches you have to figure out with your athletes, right? Like when
Sure.
you're talking about effort or when you're talking about discomfort or injury. Um, so it sounds like you would say that it was like a five, but like, the body would say like the results would be that it was much higher than that. How did you and your PT come to an agreement about what your your subjective analysis of your pain meant?
Well, so I'm fortunate in that I've worked with him for a long time, and so he's seen me kind of work through other things, and he'll say like, "Oh, like how does this feel?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's not too bad." And he'll stick his finger in there and be like, "Oh, well, this muscle is like totally effed right now. Like this is not okay. And then it's kind of established the fact that as with any endurance athlete, you kind of build up that kind of pain suppression where you're like, oh yeah, that's totally fine. That's not a big deal. And we kind of used to everything hurting a little bit at some point. And so we kind of have that background. So he kind of knows that like, okay, if I say like something's a 1 out of 10, it's kind of serious. And if I say something's like a 0.5 out of 10, then it's like, okay, well, maybe that's okay. So like the whole scale is shifted way down. And yeah, exactly. Like, I feel like that's when you have an athlete, it's why it's great to be able to like do a camp with them like you do, or see them in person and get to see, okay, like what is this breathing rate and like equate to on your 1 to 10 scale. And then you kind of say, okay, like now I can calibrate training based on where you're at, because it can kind of be hard to shift an athlete to where you want them to be sometimes.
Speaking of working with your athletes in such a way, do you have a coach that you work with, or are you self-coached?
For better or worse, I'm self-coached right now.
And how do you manage that process of pain management and identification with you as your own athlete?
So I try and I spend some time when I'm writing my own training and trying to be super objective and saying, okay, like I'm not Jesse the athlete right now, I'm Jesse the coach, and like how is he doing? And so I really try and I'll this sounds silly, but I'll actually put on like a Top Step training hat and like sit at my computer and say, okay, like writing Jesse's training, this is serious business. And so I try and like do what I can to separate the two. I'm sure I still miss the mark, but I think I've gotten better over time.
It certainly sounds like you're better at it than I ever was.
What are some of your like flashing warning lights for like Jesse the coach, considering Jesse the athlete? Like when you see X, you're like, oh, that's a problem.
Well, I think I tend to like not realize I'm tired, and then I start to get a little mean, a little rough around the edges, and so a good gauge for how I'm doing is how I interact with Amy. Um, so that's definitely my go-to. Like when Jesse the coach sees Jesse the athlete be short with Amy, he's like, okay, like there's probably a reason for that, because Amy probably didn't do anything wrong. It's probably all you. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It's one thing I look out for. I don't know if that.
I think that's great.
I think that whole it's when you get into that point where if everybody's an asshole, you're the asshole kind
Right.
of thing.
Yes.
And then that's like a moment to be like, wait a second, like what's going on? And am I just exhausted? Like am I totally beat up? Let's see. So we asked you in kind of the questions that we sent out, like some of the things that you are proudest of as an athlete and a coach, and one of them was running an actually good marathon at Ironman, Arizona, which we could probably talk about the quotes themselves. But first of all, what went into that result, both from a preparation and an execution standpoint?
So I guess like the nitty gritty of Ironman Arizona is it's a 3-loop bike course. First loop is totally clean, as in no other athletes on the course, and it's like an all-out time trial to establish position, and then everybody settles in for the next 2 laps. And that's not exactly my strength. I'm also not the tallest athlete, so like putting power out on a flat course that's probably windy also isn't exactly my strength. So getting ready for that course and getting ready for like basically a time trial and then settling into like high Ironman effort was something I worked on a lot. And like fortunately, I live in a town with the best group ride in the US, arguably. So I did the shootout a lot. And after the shootout, I'd go into Ironman pace intervals, and that was like, I think as close as you could come. I mean, yeah, I could do a ton of intervals on my own in order to get ready, but that was like pretty good. Like, especially simulating, like, yeah, it wasn't 6 bike lengths on the shootout, but simulating having to go when other people want to go, not when I want to go. Because that's how the beginning of the race is. So I did a lot of that to get ready. And I mean, you guys have done like the Aravaca loop out here.
I don't think I have.
You should.
I will.
All right. But you know, it's pretty good. Like the shootout kind of dumps you out part way up, and then you can kind of roll the rest of it. It's good aero bar riding, nobody driving out there. But I would do that a few times. And then I did a lot of like high tempo runs, like running like 18 to I did one 20 miler that was like just kind of like ease into the first mile and then just run tempo for a long time. And then execution, I actually like ate properly on the bike, and I didn't start out too hot on the first lap of the run and just like took care of business. I mean, I think like the goal has always been to break 3 hours, and so that's like 6:53s or something. And I think I started out in like the low 6:40s, and that was like, I mean, I'm never going to negative split. That's not really the kind of athlete I am. So that was like a pretty good like place for me to start and still be like in control. And I've had other races where I come out at like 6 minutes flat, and I'm like, oh yeah, this will probably work. So until I rip through all my glycogen, and then it doesn't work. But
and then as we were talking about before, an Ironman walk is a long walk.
Oh man, yeah, walking is very slow. I advocate for jogging over walking every time.
If it's available to you, absolutely.
You used a term a few minutes ago that is I think one of like the endurance industry's like great like it can mean anything to anybody. When you say tempo run, just not. And more out of like, what does tempo mean to you, both on the run and the bike? Because we're interested. I think it's one of those things that everybody uses this term, but I think everybody defines it individually. So it's like me with the greater than, less than. I'm like it could be any direction. What does tempo mean for you on the run and the bike?
So yeah, just to be clear, I never use that word with my athletes because it is too ambiguous. And like when someone says, we're just going to ride tempo, I'm like, well, like what song are we listening to, man? I don't know. Like what's going on? Like, yeah, give me a wattage, give me something. So, but I guess like if I was going to nail something down, it'd be like, that kind of uncomfortable, hard thing that you can do for a really long time. Like it's not like you can only hold it for an hour. It's well under threshold. And if you're like eating, you could probably do it for a long time. Like we could go out and ride like a 5-hour tempo ride, and it would be really hard. But if we ate, we could do it. And same on the run. It's like I can go do like a 2-hour tempo run, even though like someone else might say that like, oh yeah, you can only do tempo for like 40 minutes and then it's not tempo anymore. But like, yeah, I guess like, getting ready for an Ironman, I might try and do like 2 hours where I'm running, like building up to like running at like 6:15 pace or something. And I would say that's like tempo. It's like, I'm not at threshold. It's like, I probably started out aerobically, but I'm probably not for aerobic by the end of that. So yeah, I don't know.
That's great. No, we're always interested because just like you said, it's an ambiguous term, but I think it's also a term that people recognize and gravitate towards, and it's one of those where it's like, it's always nice to learn more about what other people mean by it.
It's like that gray area where like you're not supposed to be, right? It's
It sounds very uncomfortable the way you describe it. Sounds like it would really hurt.
Yeah.
It's like a 1 out of 10 on Jesse's pain scale.
There's only like a little blood coming out. So
right, exactly. Matt Feldmar says that tempo is definitely a song choice while exercising.
How high have you ever gotten on your personal pain scale? I want to
Ooh, good question. Like a 2?
No, so when I actually like cracked and I was like, okay, this is an actual injury. I kind of knew beforehand, but I went and did this Ironman in China last October, and I'd gotten the MRI before that, and I was kind of like talking to my PT, and he was like, I was like, if I do this, can I make it worse? And he was like, probably not. You probably made it as bad as it's already like you've done all the damage you can do. Like you might add a few weeks of healing time, but like this is gonna take a long time to heal no matter what. So I was like, okay. So went out there, did the race, got like 12 miles into the run, and then was like crying and walking, and then like walking after that, and that was a 10 out of 10. That was not, I was not in a good place.
That sounds horrible. I'm really sorry to hear it. Will you please follow that story up with how your Bear Lake Brawl run went? Because I hope it's a happier story.
Uh, I mean, on that run, I finally took my wind vest off partway through and gave it to this kid, and he later told me it allowed him to finish the race.
Oh my
So
God.
that was the highlight of that run.
Cold then. Very cold.
Yeah, it was cold. It was cold. It was fine. I got to run with the lead female for a while. She was nice, so we chatted for a bit, and yeah, it happened.
It was
It was
less painful?
much better experience.
Less painful?
Much less
Okay,
yeah,
good.
100%. It was actually my first race back since that race, so
Oh, wow.
it was good to run, and even though it wasn't a perfect day, I didn't walk and I didn't cry, so we'll call it a win.
Yeah, those are the data points are moving in the correct direction.
Yeah. I'm going to put that on race reports, like rehashing with athletes. Did you walk and did you cry? Amazing.
What is your worst habit as an athlete?
As an athlete, so like not as a human, like what do we?
I mean, it could be a human athlete that has a bad impact on your athlete behavior.
I mean, I'd say
No
it's
chance
probably
looking.
like a hazy IPA too much, and that messes with my sleep, and so that's doesn't help the recovery. But it tastes so good, so that's
I'm with you on that one. I love the hazy.
yeah.
What habit do you wish that your athletes would stop participating in?
I think, I mean, just to stay on the topic, I think sleep hygiene is something that I am like, the more I find out about more and more of my athletes, the more I'm like, wish that I could force better sleep hygiene on almost all of them. And I guess myself included as one of my athletes. But I think that is, yeah, it's a big problem, and I think it's getting to be more and more of a problem just with like the way our society is growing, and like especially with like technology becoming more and more a piece of our life, and I think it's less and less good for sleep.
What's your best habit as an athlete?
I'm great at eating. I'm
We have a lot in common, Jesse.
and I've gotten very good at doing my my PT work, foam rolling, and all the little things that I need to do now to keep moving at my age.
You're the youngest person in this room, man.
Yeah, seriously.
All
You
right,
also have
all
a
right.
top knot right now where you're 22, right?
Yes. So I turn 23 next year, so I'm
Happy
moving on
birthday.
up.
He started teaching when he was 4.
Very cool. So how did you make that transition from being an athlete to being a coach? What was it? Was it that you were looking to get out of coach or out of teaching? How did you wind up in this as a profession instead of, being an athlete and having that be your only participation in the sport?
Man, I feel like I'm going to say the same thing again, and I didn't really realize this, but it just kind of like happened. I was like, met another athlete and he was really good. And I was like, you're good. I think you could like be great. And so we started talking and I was like, yeah, I mean, I could definitely help you. And I started writing him training. And then all of a sudden, like, it became like, it just went for me, like, writing him training, helping him a little bit. And then all of a sudden I was like, he was calling me coach and I was officially coaching him. And then he started getting better and like, I don't know, like one of those challenge Rev 3 combo race things. And it's like, oh, that was super cool. And yeah, and then I just kind of started like picking up a few more athletes and yeah, the rest is history, as they say.
Can you tell us a little bit about where you are now? Like, where is Top Step, and what's your current coaching outfit looking like?
Well, I'm in my spare room at the moment, and
Oh.
it's got a ceiling fan.
Well, you're doing better than my coaching business.
You have a spare room? That's amazing. Your coaching company is doing incredibly well.
I have a bicycle set up right next to me right now.
So, I mean, I think as probably most things, took a small downturn with everything that's happened. This year's been a little bit rough on everything. But yeah, I mean, Top Step training has been, so I guess I've been coaching for like almost a decade, and I think for 4 years I stopped. 5 years I haven't taught, and I've just been coaching. And since that happened, there's been kind of a steady growth in the coaching company, because it couldn't grow before then. And yeah, so now, yeah, it's still just me, but I have I do some kicker classes and the coaching, and yeah.
You have sweet kits that your athletes wear.
My sweet kits.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I love a good Wadi kit, but I've been with Zoot for a long time, and yeah, they've been really good to me. So I was excited to move from just like a Zoot athlete to having like some Zoot custom kits for my kiddos, and that's been fun.
So, Molly and I are constantly surprised by this industry and this job. What is some challenge in coaching that you did not expect?
Man, which one? There's
anyone. Your favorite one, the one that keeps you up at night.
Well, I guess to keep this positive, sometimes there are those athlete situations where it's like it's not as straightforward as it usually is, and so you really have to like kind of puzzle it out. And I really like those situations because I feel like those kind of stretch me a bit. But yeah, I think that those situations where like an athlete's like getting injured or like kind of plateaued and you're like like I guess like that kind of standard progression that you think about, like I hate to use the word like standard, but you know what I mean. Like it isn't working, and then you have to like kind of come up with something different. And I think that those things keep me up at night, like trying to figure out like what is the right next piece to make this athlete better, because you can't go back. You can do something different next block, but it's going to be different because they had this experience, right? So like you're constantly building, and you can never like redo the block that you're going into. Mm-hmm. So sometimes that weighs on me.
The puzzle's fun though.
Yeah, no, totally. It's like the fun part, but it's also like, yeah, it's both. Mm-hmm. It's good fun though.
Absolutely. And you have the unique challenge of training in the desert. So for everybody out there, I have seen Jesse running up Mount Lemmon before. It's a real thing. It happened. I remember it. I was like, what is happening? Can you tell us a little bit about what unique challenges the environment presents in Tucson? And is it actually as terrifying as those of us who do not train in the desert think it is?
I mean, the desert is only terrifying because there's so little water, especially this year. We didn't get any monsoons. But I think that there's like an actual real chance of death or major dehydration that people underestimate. But I think every area has its like kind of unique challenges, right? But I think that people, if you don't like consider that it is very dry and extremely like harsh to be out in the environment here, that you can really get yourself in situations, and like you can't just say, okay, like I'm doing Ironman Coeur d'Alene in June, so I need to do a 6-hour ride with a 1-hour runoff, and I'm going to do that at like the last week in May. Like you just can't do that here unless you're going to like do some of that indoors. Um, and I think that like the how you train needs to be different because the environment is so harsh. Like I mean, it's still 100 degrees here for some reason.
Like now?
And, well, it's cooling off now, but like the high for this week is like around 100 still every day, and it's that's very abnormal. But and it's it does take a toll on you, and like being out in the sun all day really takes a toll on you, and it's an extra stress that I think people really need to consider. Um, and like especially like I feel like I used to be able to handle the heat a little bit more. Like I'm still okay at like racing in it, but I do think that as I've gotten older, my body's been like less adaptable to dealing with like running when it's 120 degrees out. And so I think that like where you're at as an athlete or in your life all needs to kind of figure into like how much heat exposure you can handle, and like what that stress does to you, because it's kind of a moving target like every other form of stress, but it's definitely a real one.
Absolutely. So it's less the coyotes and snakes and cactus danger than it is the heat and dehydration danger.
Yeah, the animals here are like some of them have a little bit of poison, but they're all just trying to survive.
Just to
They're not
eat.
that bad. Just don't touch any plants. They're That's what you have to watch out for.
Don't pee in the bushes.
Going back to the puzzle, one of the things you told us that you're proud of is having an athlete follow that kind of unconventional approach and still finding success. You brought up Adam Fay getting third at Eagleman 70.3 last year and putting up the fastest run split. Could you tell us a little bit about what that unconventional approach was, and did you have to do any work to convince him to follow it?
I might a little asterisk there. I think when I said fastest run split, it was maybe the fastest run split in my heart. I think he might have had like the third fastest run split on the day.
Still counts.
Still counts. Still counts. So yeah, well, to start with the end, I had to do some serious convincing, and that was hard because like I mean Adam's a smart guy, and so when he would question me, I would like really think about it and kind of question myself, like, okay, like is this the right thing to do? And so, but we stayed the course, and what we did was we basically did zero intensity in his running, like not one run was. I mean, he kind of runs fast when he just runs easy, but like but all of his runs were very, very easy. And for him, every single run for like, I don't know, the 3 months before that or something. And he was like, how am I going to run fast if all I've been running is like 7-minute pace for months and months and months? And so we did throw in like some 15-second strides. And I think that was it. And I was like, you will, I promise. Just trust me, you'll be fine. And he was like, should I do like, a tempo, just because we want to throw that word tempo out a few more times? Like, I should do like maybe one or two before the race. And I was like, no, like, we're not going to do that because that's like how you got injured before. So, and like in my head, I thought it was going to work. I had a lot of faith, but it's still like that, a couple percent there where it's like, well, maybe this isn't going to work. Maybe he's going to run slow. But got him to starting line super healthy and super fit. And, obviously like it worked and he ran really well, and it's like, okay, like, but yeah, that like kind of going all in with the athlete where you're both like, okay, this is not like the standard route, but we think it's going to be the best way, to success. And, having the athlete be all in on like what you're thinking, is it's a good feeling.
Was the volume higher even though the intensity was down?
The volume was a little bit higher. We did a little bit more intensity on the bike, but we didn't do any. We kept the run like the duration of each run down a little bit, but we added in a little bit more frequency in there. But like the real name of the game was like wanting to make sure he was healthy and consistent. I mean, um, his history as an athlete is that he's run some fast 5Ks. Like he has good leg speed, and so like, and he's a strong athlete. So I wasn't worried about any of those things. Just making sure he's like healthy at the starting line. So we really just focused on like consistency and a little bit of uptick in volume, but like nothing crazy.
Yeah, I'm always surprised at how the crossover from cycling intensity can help run speed. It's one of those things where you're like, why does this work? And then it works.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what the limiter is there, right? But I think that there's such I mean, it's all aerobic, right? So if you're making your heart stronger, then.
And you also helped an athlete get ready to hike the PCT, right? Can you tell us a little bit about how you approached that puzzle?
Yeah, so this crazy guy Cameron that I coached has gone in and out of like triathlon, ultra marathoning, and just kind of bounced around a bit. But then he said he's going to do this hike, and I mean, again, we just worked a lot on like consistency, and there was nothing crazy that we did. And I think that was like, again, the biggest thing is like, okay, like you don't need to do anything crazy. Like you're going to be hiking a lot of this. So we did, we just did a lot of consistency leading up to it. And then like, I did a lot of running leading up to it, even though it was hike. And then, yeah. And then during, we talked about a few things about like, all the ways to stay healthy. And that was a big piece of, keeping him healthy, like with changing his shoes, and I mean some simpler things, but like things that for him were pretty important because he has kind of like sensitive feet. And so yeah, just laying out a real plan of like how to attack this that actually makes sense. And also like you think about like tour riders that do crappy the first few days, you're like, oh, they're gonna have a good tour. Mm-hmm. Like we had him like ease in, so the first few days were like, I don't remember exactly, but he hiked like 6 or 8 or 10 miles. And by the end, he was hiking like 25 miles. But I was like, we really like built him up into it so that he could have a good month 3 of the hike, not day 1 and 2.
Right. Strong start.
Yeah. We have 2 questions from chat.
All right.
Both of them from Amy. So prepare yourself. Our Amy, not your Amy.
That would be amazing, though.
That would be great. If your Amy's like on Twitch in the other room.
She's like, what's for dinner?
Like holding Frankie in one hand, Twitch in the other, just
like I'm gonna get this guy. Okay. Were you officially a thoroughbred?
I was, yes. I don't have a blood certificate, but I did graduate from Skidmore College.
Okay. I was like, where's this going?
Yeah. I was
Worst mascot ever.
I was like, this is one of those questions that I'm like, I don't know what I'm about to ask.
Right.
Here we go.
I'm glad you took that.
Yeah. I would like to point out that we, the Vassar College Brewers, did beat the Skidmore Thoroughbreds 3-1 my junior year of college. So, not that it means anything.
My college mascot was just fine as the Blue Demons, but my high school mascot was the Markers. Because at Narix Hall, we leave our hallmark of excellence everywhere we go.
That's rough.
Wow.
It really was. We were not very good at sports.
My graduate school, the Violets.
Oh, the Markers and the Violets could definitely play each other.
Yeah.
We were an all-girls school. We would kick your butt.
Yeah. All right. Next question from our Amy. What is one thing you do wrong at home that will definitely send your Amy into a fit?
Just one thing.
What is it?
I would say the dishes or me not making the bed. Those two things are. I like to do dishes all at once, so I kind of leave them out. And then when I get home, they're done. I'm like, oh, that's great, they're done. But turns out, me being happy about that isn't the appropriate response. So.
That was very politically put. Well done.
Solid.
So I think those are the questions that we have got from chat.
Perfect timing.
So we are going to we're going to wrap things up here. So Jesse is also sponsored by Diamond Bicycles, Playtry, Zoot Sports, Ice Friction, F2C Nutrition, R-Bar Energy. I don't know what that one is.
Ooh, R-Bar is delicious.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Smith Performance Center, and one of our particular favorites, Zelio Skincare, which I'm sure is like even more important in the desert. But Jesse, thank you so much for coming and spending some time in detention with me and Molly. We both really appreciate it.
And I bet that Zelio Skincare is what keeps you looking young even at your advanced age.
That is it. That is the secret. Is, copious amounts. Got to keep the nose. It's it sticks out pretty far. Yeah, I love the stuff. But seriously, thank you guys for having me on. It was fun to catch up and see you guys again.
It was great to see you again too. And thank you for dropping all your knowledge on our endurance school athletes. And for all of those folks who are out there today, make sure you join us again tomorrow morning for Yoga with Amy VT. There will be a dance party midway through, per usual.
Whoa.
Yep, it's awesome. It's the best yoga class on internet television. And then we will be back again on Thursday morning for our Swift group ride. Jesse, you're always welcome to join us for that if you're up at, I don't know, Arizona does that weird time change, so I never know what time it is there, but that time in the morning.
You're presently the same time as us, but I think that changes like next week.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Man, I'm the worst at time zones, so I always have to ask my Amy what time it really is. I always do it the wrong way. But yeah, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
Please do.
Come. 6:30 Pacific, whatever time.
That's right. That's right.
Gotcha.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And we will see you again soon. And guys out there, here is to a happier and faster tomorrow. Bye, guys.